On the morning of the 19th of July, 1821, Queen Caroline of Brunswick stepped down from her carriage at Westminster Abbey in a diamond-studded gown to be crowned beside her husband, and a doorkeeper asked her for a ticket she did not have. If these royal stories fascinate you, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss the next one. She had none. Kings and queens do not carry tickets to their own coronations. So she moved to the next door, the great west door of the abbey, and there a guard lowered his bayonet across her path. Behind her stood her Chamberlain, Lord Hood, and he did the only thing left to do. He pleaded. He argued with the officials, told them who she was, demanded they let the wife of the king pass into the church where the king was about to be crowned. They would not, and the crowd, packed tight along the streets around the abbey, watched a queen barred from her own coronation. Some of them had cheered her only months before. On this morning, as she stood there refused at door after door, a few of them began to jeer. She climbed back into her carriage and rode home. Within 3 weeks, she would be dead. Hold on to that, because everything about her death is tangled up in that closed door. To understand how a queen ends up standing on the wrong side of it, you have to go back 26 years to the day she was married. In 1795, Caroline married George, then Prince of Wales. It was not a love match. It was an arrangement to clear his debts. Parliament had agreed to pay off the vast sums the prince owed if he would only settle down and marry a suitable German princess. Caroline was the price of solvency. Picture the arithmetic of it. A prince who married a woman to pay his creditors and never forgave her for the debt. By his own account, George was repelled by her from the very first night. He is said to have called for brandy the moment he met her. They lasted long enough to produce a single child, Princess Charlotte, and then they separated in all but name. He went back to his mistresses. She was pushed to the edge of court life, and then out of it entirely. So Caroline left. For years she lived apart from her husband, travelling through Europe, keeping her own household, her own company. And while she moved from city to city, George, now Prince Regent, while his father, the old king, lost his mind, made sure the stories followed her, whispers of her conduct abroad, talk of who she kept close. He had the money and the machinery to shape what England believed about the wife he could not stand. Then the arrangement broke open. In 1820, old King George III died, and the Prince Regent became King George IV. A crown was coming, a coronation was coming, and the new king wanted one thing above all else, to be rid of her, never, under any circumstances, to see her crowned queen beside him. His first move was quiet, and it was cruel. He ordered her name struck from the prayer book. In churches across the land, the royal family was prayed for by name every Sunday, and the king had his own wife erased from those prayers as though she had already ceased to exist. Remember that struck out name in the prayer book. It tells you the ending before we reach it, because striking a name from a book was only the beginning. To destroy her legally, George did not stop there. He put his own wife on public trial in the House of Lords, and he shipped witnesses across the sea from Italy to swear that she had betrayed him. They called it the Pains and Penalties Bill, and it arrived in the House of Lords in the summer of 1820. Strip away the legal language, and what it meant was simple. If the bill passed, Caroline would lose her title, and the marriage would be over. No divorce court, no jury of ordinary men, just the peers of the realm, sitting in judgment on their king's wife, deciding whether she had betrayed him. The whole case rested on one man, Bartolomeo Pergami. He had started in Caroline's service as a courier, a tall, handsome Italian who carried her messages and drove her carriage. By the time she returned from her years abroad, he was her Chamberlain, the most trusted man in her household. The prosecution said he had also been in her bed. To prove it, they needed witnesses, and the witnesses came by ship from Italy, servants and boatmen and maids who had worked around her rooms. And here the case began to rot. Those witnesses had been found, paid, and coached. Under cross-examination they stumbled. One after another they forgot their own stories, contradicted each other, and gave the same 3 words when pressed on detail. Non mi ricordo. I do not remember. It became a joke in the coffee houses, printed on cartoons and sung in the streets. A parade of paid strangers claiming to have seen through keyholes, and none of them able to keep the tale straight. Outside the chamber, something the king had not planned for was happening. London was roaring for Caroline. This was a city sick to its teeth of George, a bloated, extravagant monarch who spent fortunes on palaces and pavilions while ordinary people scraped by. So they took her side, not because they believed her a saint, because she was the woman their king was trying to crush, and that was enough. Crowds filled the road to Westminster whenever she passed. Her carriage was mobbed with supporters, men unhitching the horses to pull it themselves, cheering her name until they were hoarse. Sailors, weavers, shopkeepers. They lit bonfires for her and smashed the windows of anyone who would not. She had stopped being a disgraced wife on trial. She had become a symbol, the people against the crown, and George could feel the ground shifting under him. For a moment, the most hated queen in England was the most beloved woman in London. Hold on to that reversal, because it is about to be worth nothing at all. When the vote finally came, the bill scraped through the Lords by a margin so thin it was useless. A handful of votes. The government looked at that number, looked at the mobs outside, and quietly dropped the whole thing. No verdict, no conviction. Caroline had beaten the trial. In the streets they celebrated for days. But winning the crowd is not the same as winning the crown. And that is the distinction that killed her. The people could roar her name from every corner of London, and it changed nothing about the one door that mattered. She had defeated the bill. She had not been made queen. Not really. Not where it counted. As the coronation drew near, Caroline did the reasonable thing. She wrote to her husband a formal letter, sealed in wax, asking a plain question. What robes was she to wear? And where was she to sit at the crowning? It was the request of a woman who assumed she had a place. She received no reply. None. The silence itself was the answer. Behind that silence, the machinery had already turned. The Privy Council met and quietly ruled that the Queen had no right to be crowned, no right even to attend. Guards were briefed, tickets were controlled, handed out only to those approved. It was decided in a room she would never see, weeks before she woke on the morning of the ceremony. She was writing to ask which robes to wear. They had already decided she would wear none. So on coronation morning, the guards already had their orders, and Caroline did not try one door. She tried 3 of the Abbey's doors in turn, and behind each one stood the same silence her letters had received. The first door was the one nearest her carriage. A doorkeeper stepped forward and asked quite simply for her ticket. She had none. No one had sent her one, because the Privy Council had already decided she was not to be there. Lord Hood, her Chamberlain, stood at her side and argued that a queen needed no ticket to enter her own coronation. The officials did not move, so she walked to the second door. Same question, same silence. And then the third, where a soldier lowered his bayonet across the way, and the point of it hung there between a woman in a diamond gown and the crowning of her husband. 3 doors, 3 refusals. Lord Hood pleading each time, his voice rising, getting nowhere. And here is the cruel part. The crowd that had roared for her outside the House of Lords, that had mobbed her carriage and cheered her through the streets for months, was watching. For a while they were with her. Then something turned, as she stood there, shut out, small, arguing at a locked door. Some of them began to jeer. The same voices. It is one thing to be humiliated by a king. It is another to feel the mood of the street curdle in front of you. Live. In the space of a few minutes. There was nothing left to try. She turned, walked back to her carriage, and climbed in. And she rode home through the very streets that had once carried her like a heroine. No coronation, no robes, no seat. Just the long ride back, past the same faces. That night, according to her attendants, she took to her bed. She complained of a violent pain in her stomach, sharp and constant. Her household sent for help. She was given large doses of milk, of magnesia and laudanum, the standard remedies of the day, and for a little while, everyone hoped it would pass. It did not. Over the following days, she grew steadily worse. The pain deepened. The strength drained out of her. Her Chamberlain and her household watched something they could not fix. Not just a body failing, but a spirit going out. Those closest to her were convinced of one thing, and they said so afterward. The door had broken her. She had fought a king through a public trial and survived it. She had won the crowds, and then a locked piece of oak had done what the whole machinery of the state could not. Whatever the physicians wrote about her stomach, the people who sat beside her bed believed she had simply stopped wanting to live. Before we reach the end of it, one small thing, if these stories, the ones the palace would rather you didn't linger on, are the kind you keep coming back for, subscribing cost you nothing, and there are more of them already lined up. The bell means you actually see the next one instead of hoping the algorithm remembers you. She died on the 7th of August, 1821, less than 3 weeks after the coronation she had been shut out of. In her final hours, she told those around her that she was not sorry to go. Sit with that for a moment. A Queen of England, saying she was glad to be leaving it. Her last request was not about revenge or vindication. She asked to be buried far from all of it. Back home in Brunswick, under a single line she chose herself. Caroline, the injured Queen of England. Not the disgraced one. Not the adulteress the trial had tried to paint. The injured one. And that is the gap. The official version was tidy. A woman of scandalous conduct. Rightly kept from a throne she had no business near. But her staff, her Chamberlain, and the biographers who came later describe something colder. A woman worn down, year after year, by an institution that had decided its king's image mattered more than her life. Whether it was grief that killed her, or the illness in her stomach, the point is the same. By the time she reached that abbey, the machine had already ruled. She was never going to wear the crown. The verdict was written long before the pain began. The trial had witnesses, transcripts, a bill in the Lords, and it settled nothing. A single locked door settled everything. The door said everything the trial could not.